Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming for this discussion. Let me welcome you in the name of the International Institute for Peace. We're talking today about Kosovo's visa liberalization and whether it's going to happen sometime soon. And before we proceed with the panel discussion, I would like to introduce you our co-organizer of this event. This is MEJZINI, who is a student of Master of Arts program in Vienna. She studies applied human rights. And she actually brought to us this idea of organizing this event, and she also made her own project out of that. So she will speak a little bit about her project, and then we will proceed with the discussion. So thank you very much again for coming, and I hope you will enjoy this event.
So hello to everyone. Personally, this topic is really important to me as a student of human rights field, and I'm very grateful that I'm sitting with all of you here today to talk more. Firstly, I want to thank you, my master program, for giving me the opportunity to make a project and as a part of the curriculum program, and also the IIP for collaborating with me and consider the topic of visa liberalization in a more in a more broad sense. I have to thank also the 9 Kosovar students who participated in my video and shared their stories without any hesitation. I think that the issue of visa liberalization, it's really important to be talked today and to be discussed more, and maybe it's more good to focus on the future possibilities. When we talk about the process, the EU, the European Union, and its institutions have done a lot for Kosovo since 1999, and EU by far is the largest contributor to the activities in Kosovo through institution building and also through socio-economic development, and this is really important. Also, many initiatives have been taken underway, starting from the summit in Greece in 2003 to build a regional cooperation between Western Balkan countries and more, and also the Berlin process from 2014 and on, which was a major contributor to bring 6 Balkan countries together through joint institutions and also through human relations. However, the danger of isolation and the danger of unfair treatment still remains, because this process certainly have affected in a negative way, or even by slowing business cooperation, regional cooperation, and also students exchanges or events. I think that here we have the opportunity to discuss the issue from different perspectives and from a various perspectives and various aspects that impact the Kosovars from this process, and also their integration within Europe. Basically, it's important to discuss the micro and macro elements and aspects, to bring it all together, and how this process flows from top to bottom, and what are the consequences in the Kosovar society. Because as I mentioned before, the restriction and the barriers of freedom of movement have cost a lot so far. Maybe it's good to mention the last event from last week, the joint statement by the Vienna Triangle, composed by Germany, Poland, and also France, that the visa liberalization process should move forward. To talk more about my video, the main purpose was to share the students' experiences and to raise awareness on the unnecessary bureaucracy of the visa application overall. For me, the video from the starting from gathering the material and also the video production was so remarkable and so unique, And I think that students that participated there did a really great job by showing the truth and how it really is the process. I think that education is really important, especially if you study in another country like Europe, for example. I'm studying here in Vienna myself and I love it. So without anything more to add, I think that we can see. I invite you to see the video, and thank you very much.
Visa liberalization dialogue has been underway in Kosovo since 2012. It was announced on the 19th January 2012 that the European Commission was initiating discussions with Kosovo regarding visa liberalization. In June of that year, the Commission presented Kosovo with a roadmap on the requirements, setting forth the legislative and institutional measures Kosovo needed to adopt in order to move forward with the visa process. In 2014, European Union and Kosovo began negotiating the Stabilization and Association Agreement between the European Union and Kosovo in Brussels. Later on, this agreement was signed in Strasbourg on October 2015. During the fourth and the last report in May 2016, the Commission presented a proposal to the European Parliament and Council of the European Union to lift visa requirements for Kosovo citizens upon achieving the two last benchmarks: the ratification of the demarcation agreement between Kosovo and Montenegro and the fight against corruption. The border demarcation agreement with Montenegro was signed on March 2018. Also in that year, the European Commission, in their report, confirmed that Kosovo has successfully met the last requirement of the visa liberalization roadmap. Therefore, the report showed that Kosovo authorities have established and strengthened a steady track record of investigations and final court rulings in cases concerning organized crime and corruption. As a result of the completion of two last benchmarks in July same year, the European Commission gave the recommendation for visa liberalization for Kosovo citizens. It called on the European Parliament and the Council to swiftly approve and adopt the Commission's approval on lifting visa requirements for Kosovo citizens. In addition, the EU Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs gave approval to the recommendation of visa liberalization for Kosovo citizens in August of the same year. Furthermore, in September, the European Parliament agreed to open talks on the abolition of the visa regime for Kosovo citizens. The approval came with 420 pro votes and 186 against it. 1 year later, by voting 331 pro, 126 against, and 12 abstentions, the European Parliament reconfirmed its position regarding the Kosovo visa liberalization situation. The members showed their readiness to negotiate with the Council so Kosovars can start traveling visa-free as soon as possible to the Schengen area. In addition, the report of 2021 of the European Commission has concluded that Kosovo's visa liberalization process that is still pending in the Council of the European Union should be treated as a matter of urgency, as Kosovo remains the only country in the Western Balkans without visas, despite fulfilling all the benchmarks since 2018. Lastly, on July 2022, the European Parliament, in its last report for the assessment of the political situation in 3 Balkan countries, including Kosovo, emphasized that the European Union member states should move forward urgently with adopting a visa-free regime for the citizens of Kosovo. Any further delays would undermine the EU's credibility and reputation as a reliable partner. The citizens of Kosovo have been affected for a long time by this drawn-out process. Since nearly half of Kosovo's population is under the age of 25 and 19% are between 15 and 24, visa requirements have affected the young generation the most. The right of movement of Kosovar students focuses on the educational journeys of Kosovo youth in the Schengen area and depicts the difficulties students face during their application process by sharing crucial details of their experiences. An intersectional context is presented and interlinked into the stories of 10 Kosovar students. Today, students place significant importance on their personal, professional, and educational development, both through formal and non-formal activities. The following video is a pattern of the bureaucracy of the visa regime and encompasses long wait for appointments and embassies, the multiple documents required, and the excessive application fees for students, which in certain instances led to rejections. Migration for educational purposes is highly influential, especially in a young nation like Kosovo. For that reason, the stories display cases of discrimination against the right of free movement based on territorial differences. Students share their perspectives on how these restrictions have hindered, discouraged, and violated their human right, the right of free movement within Europe.
I am sharing with you the experience I went through with the Diplomatic Bureau of Belgium in Prishtina in 2021, when I won a vaccinology summer school scholarship at Antwerp University. My first step after receiving the written approval from the summer school was to contact the Diplomatic Bureau of Belgium in Prishtina and ask them to inform me about the procedures I had to follow. The office answered the first email promptly, and I was requested to send some documents. After I sent the required documents, I never heard back from the bureau, although I wrote to them multiple times. My next option was to apply for a different visa at another embassy in order to attend this prominent summer school that was important for my daily professional career, organized by Prof. Dr. Pierre Van Dam. Fortunately, this procedure worked for me. Hence, I truly believe there should be an end to this time-consuming and bureaucratic way of getting a visa for such significant non-formal education activities. It creates a barrier and discourages Kosovo's youth.
I have been engaged in informal education activities since 2018 within Kosovo and in neighboring countries such as Albania, Macedonia, and Serbia, countries where we can travel without visas. I applied to several different training programs in European countries with the hope that I could participate. Unfortunately, in most cases, it was unable to participate since these activities occur within a specific time. For that reason, I couldn't apply for a visa and wait for a response from the embassy office because it takes 1 month or more to finalize this procedure. This fact often depresses us, but we live with the hope that one day we will be able to move without barriers.
I began the application process at the Embassy of Austria in February 2021, starting with the legalization of documents and gathering other papers needed for an Austrian residence permit. In this prolonged application process, I would like to point out an important aspect that adversely affected my situation. Comparable with every other Kosovar student, I had to schedule an appointment at the embassy in Skopje a few months ago. Considering the pandemic situation, the lengthy wait, and the necessity of booking an appointment early. But as a result of not completing all the necessary documents by the deadline, I lost the first appointment at the beginning of September. Subsequently, I had to wait until the end of December for a new date. My completed documents were submitted in December, hopefully anticipating that the office will take into account the university registration deadline. But no. Upon receiving the final answer from the embassy, the registration deadline for that semester passed.
In 2017, I applied to the University of Social Sciences in Ljubljana, Department of Political Science. At that time, there was no possibility to schedule appointments at the embassy office, and we had to wait in long queues before the entrance. One of the biggest disappointments in this experience was that every student arrived timely, while I was the only one in the group who had to wait 3 weeks for a response. Consequently, I reached Ljubljana a month late. After several personal attempts and assistance from the university department, the embassy finally responded to my request. The fact that I started this program late compared to my peers demotivated me. Also, an essential element worth mentioning for people who have been and are in the same situation as me is the ruthless and rude behavior of the workers in the embassy.
Arizona is currently a recipient of a scholarship that supports excellent international students enrolled at the University of Insubria in Varese, Italy. Because of her outstanding results in the first year of studies, Arizona won opportunity for the Erasmus exchange program at Lig University in Belgium to continue her studies for the third semester. She stated, "In my situation, to maintain my status as a student of the University of Insubria doing the semester abroad in Belgium, I had to apply for 2 different visas and 2 different residence permits within 1 year. Therefore, I confirm that my experience already differs from those of my classmates. The Belgian consulate in Kosovo does not issue visas, hence I had to travel to Bulgaria to obtain one when there is always the risk of rejection."
After completing my bachelor studies in architecture in Kosovo, I decided to continue my master's studies, and the first destination I desired and thought of was Vienna. I started the application process in 2017 after being accepted to the University of Vienna, cheerful and enthusiastic about the future. When I completed all the required documents at that time, I submitted my application to the Austrian embassy in Skopje. Later, I was asked for an additional paper to verify the place of my residence in Austria. Consequently, I sent all the necessary letters for this request. After 5 months, the embassy informed me that the residence guarantee was unreliable. For that reason, my residence permit application was rejected. Since I gathered all the required documents and received the university confirmation letter, this 1-year experience was very depressing. Also, it is necessary to note the high application costs and the monetary challenges during this procedure.
I will share with you 2 experiences that were very disappointing for me. Voluntary exchange in Poland in 2018, a program organized by Erasmus, European Voluntary Service, and the workshop We Make Democracy in Switzerland in 2021. I was denied visas in both cases because the embassy office lacked confidence that I would not return to Kosovo after completing the programs. As part of Roma, Ashkali and Egyptian communities in Kosovo, such stereotypes about illegal immigration are discriminatory and very disturbing. In the second case, I didn't even have the right to appeal the refusal of the visa. It was unjust the lack of opportunity to argue my intentions. In both cases, around the period of time, I was actively involved in voluntary work besides various internships during my professional career in Kosovo.
Blarina's biggest disappointment was an international 2-week workshop organized in the summer of 2022 by a Gaia organization involving students from around the globe in a voluntary practical project known as the European Solidarity Corps. Since the topics related to the environment are current in Kosovo, Blarina has passed all the equipment stages and was accepted to participate in a workshop. She stated, "While the pandemic situation has been a critical period for the whole world, visa procedure became more challenging for me, as the diplomatic office of Austria in Kosovo was not working with the parties due to the situation. I applied to the embassy of Austria in Macedonia. However, I did not receive any response after several attempts to communicate with them."
In April 2021, my colleague and I were informed that we would be presenting our work at the 13th International Congress of the European Association for Mental Health and Intellectual Disabilities from the 23rd until the 25th of September 2021 in Berlin, Germany. As proud as I was of this accomplishment, my enthusiasm for participating was lessened by the uncertainty of the visa application process. It took 4 months to get an appointment at the German embassy, and the closest possible date was on the 13th of September, 10 days before the beginning of the Congress. In August, the embassy announced the opening of free appointment dates. On the night of the 31st of July, I logged into the embassy website from different devices, trying to set an appointment. Finally, on the 2nd of August, I managed to schedule an appointment at the German embassy to present our academic work at the Congress in Berlin. The lengthy application process may discourage citizens of Kosovo from applying to such events, while participants from different European countries will not face such challenges.
My journey to Vienna for my master's studies at the University of Applied Arts in Human Rights was very challenging because the application process was quite limited due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I received the confirmation letter of my residence permit in Austria at the beginning of February, 1 month before classes began. Aside from the long wait for an appointment and high application fees, I must mention the lack of communication from the Austrian Embassy of Skopje staff to answer my emails and phone calls. Without the university department's constant assistance to get the visa D for entering Austria, I would have missed the entire semester. However, despite the help, I couldn't start my studies on time because I missed the program's first week. In addition, I had to arrive and arrange my accommodation in Vienna while other colleagues continued their second week of lectures.
Thank you very much. I would now invite all the speakers to join the panel, and we will proceed with the discussion. Wherever you prefer. So we have heard stories of 10 students, and one of these students is joining us here today as well. That's QENDRESA. And after this very, on the ground and very kind of practical side of the issue, how it affects people directly, we will hear of three experts who will tell us more about why it is there at all and why are we talking about this today. And I would like to shortly introduce them to all of you, maybe, or I'm sure that most of them are already known to you. And I will start with DONIKA EMINI, who is joining us today, flying from London, but also from Prishtina. And she's the director of CiviKos, a platform of non-governmental organizations in Kosovo. DONIKA, thank you very much for accepting our invitation despite your busy schedule. And next to my right is KRISTOF Bender, who is the deputy chairman at the European Stability Initiative, a Berlin-based think tank. And KRISTOF is based in Vienna. He is also Europe's Future Fellow at the Institute of Human Sciences. Thank you for coming. And the third speaker today is SAMIR BEHARIĆ, who is youth activist and research officer at the Balkan Forum, and he's based in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So let me directly go to you, DONIKA, and ask you how people view the current situation in Prishtina. How does this whole process look like to them, and what they expect maybe, or what are their hopes or frustrations? Yeah, that's actually a very important one. So please try to say it in under 10 minutes, okay?
Oh, definitely. Well, no. I'm very happy to be here, and probably, I don't know, I've probably participated in yet another panel in which I talked about visa liberalization. It's interesting because every time I write something or I attend a panel and I talk about this issue, I say this is going to be my last time, but then it's never the last time. I'm thanking QENDRESA for the initiative. It's really interesting to see the stories because this is probably the story of every Kosovar citizens, at least those who tried to travel. I'm sharing a fresh example. My colleague who has a stable job just recently returned from Sweden. she is not a potential immigrant profile, was invited by the EU to attend an event in Prague, and it was in cooperation with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Czech Republic. And nobody was giving her an appointment to actually apply for a visa. We had to intervene, and she ended up going to Skopje paying 150 euros for all plus the transportation and everything. And the visa that was granted to her was 3 days long. So basically, if she had a delayed flight, which is very likely to happen nowadays, she would have had to stay in the airport, stranded, because that would be illegal stay. Not even a week visa. And this was the case with the Hungarian embassy in Prishtina. We recently had the state visit of Hungary, and it was literally told that Hungary supports visa liberalization for Kosovo, but Hungary issues visa only for one, not definitely longer than 1 week, and it's only one entry. And you really have to call the embassy upon your arrival in Prishtina and tell them that you have arrived there and that you haven't applied for asylum somewhere in Europe. For me personally, in Croatia, they held my passport at the reception during the 2015 migration wave because they wouldn't trust that I would stay in Dubrovnik and that I wouldn't flee to Europe. So all these stories are really demotivating because you just feel like second-class citizen when you are treated that way. And really it's a competition to get an appointment in Prishtina. We done a map of embassies, and Austria definitely is among the worst ones in the way that it treats, applicants. Also, QENDRESA had a lot of stories from Austria, and I even told Stephanie this is an attack to the Austrian MFA. But like we map the embassies, which ones are the worst to apply to, and which ones are the best, that you can at least get some decent
Which
years.
ones are the best?
Germany, they give up to 5 years, and Switzerland to 3 years. So basically, if you get an appointment in these two embassies, you are lucky. So we are here because of chain of events, and mostly, of course, because of the things that happened within the EU, but also in Kosovo, because unfortunately we did not make it to be in the group with Ukraine and Georgia. That was the train we have missed, and this is what we don't understand often in the Balkans, that the EU is a very complex mechanism, and sometimes these windows of opportunities open, and then you really have to use them. If we had been in the group with Ukraine and Georgia, there would be no excuse or justification from the EU to say no to Kosovo at that point. But then we were dealing with internal crisis, mostly driven by the demarcation agreement with Montenegro, which still we don't know whether that agreement was correct or incorrect. We ended up ratifying the same agreement, but 2 years late, and it was already, the damage had been already done. Many political parties gained popularity from it, one of them even becoming the leader and the Prime Minister of Kosovo, and ratifying the same agreement that he was personally throwing tear gas in the parliament to stop ratification of. So it really then shows the complexity within the country, because from 2018 Kosovo has been going through numerous political crises. We had 3 pairs of elections, and we were changing governments every 2 years, so really there was no convincing bilaterally any EU member state that the reforms and that the one problematic benchmark, that is fighting corruption, is being fulfilled, or there is a track record that is being kept after 2018, because there was no government to report. And they were mostly temporary. One of them even lasted only 50 days. The circumstances have changed, though, because we have a new government that is stable, and we are having a new government that is realizing that with the EU, not a single issue is an EU matter. it matters and it's important to reach out to member states. And this is something that we realized very late, because we thought the EU Commission said yes, the Parliament said yes, and we are good to go. No, you have to lobby bilaterally. And this is something that Kosovo has done very, very late. And it was partially because there are some countries like the Netherlands which did not really offer the opportunity to solve this bilaterally, because they were like, okay, this is a new matter, we deal it from the EU, institutions. But then there was France, which was basically the main opposer, because Netherlands is always okay with being sidelined, especially when it comes to Western Balkans and some decisions, because they are like, we are strict with rule of law, we cannot say yes, we won't block it, so if other member states say yes, then we will go with the flow. But France was the one that was actually more reluctant, and what the government of Houthi did, but also was followed by Kurdish government, was that approaching bilaterally and trying to see what are the concerns and how we can address the concerns. First is, of course, migration. So I have some statistics, because we are going to publish a paper. Asylum seekers in France are an issue for not just for Kosovars, but also like other nationalities, because of the French system. In Germany, you cannot do that. They will send you back, or they won't even let you apply. But in France, it's more easier to go through asylum process, and that's why this gap has been used widely. And it is very interesting to see that from 2013, in which France has 5,205 asylum seekers from Kosovo, now it's down to 855 in 2021. So it's still high, but not as high as it used to be. And countries like Germany have really prevented the illegal migration, so almost to zero, because Germany has this open door policy in which you can go to Germany legally and work. It's regular migration. Germany needs workers, and workers from Kosovo can go there. So it's kind of a process that is taking place smoothly, and that's why asylum applications are low in numbers. So what the government of Kosovo did is that signing bilateral agreements on, of course, rule of law, security, and making sure that they are following up. The government is also working actively in informing the EU member states, the embassies, regularly on not just migration, but also the fight against corruption and organized crime. So they are constantly being fed with new information, really showing the dedication of Kosovo to be working on this issue. Of course, there might be also concerns what will happen next.
But maybe just let me stop you there.
Yeah, the statement. Yeah, but the statement was very funny, because in Kosovo we were like, if Germany and France are, publishing a statement supporting the visa liberalization, who are these, pledging to? Because they were the ones that were actually in the driving seat in the process. It was because of these two countries, member states that didn't make it to the Council of Europe. So that's why we are kind of hoping that this is really going to be the last time we're talking about this issue, but it's still too early to celebrate, because we have embarrassingly celebrated twice, and we are not going to do it the third time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads me to another question that I want to ask KRISTOF. So we've heard also from QENDRESA's video that all the official rules, formal rules, were already fulfilled in 2018, and still there is no visa liberalization. There is some optimism that DONIKA has shared that maybe this time it's finally going to happen. But in between, the council meeting is happening in October, so there is still some events also in the region that are happening in between. So what can go wrong? Or what shouldn't go wrong? So it's really happening. What are your perspectives on the nearest weeks?
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. So it's in a way also a bit of a scandal that we are discussing this, this topic still in 2022. Okay, so why is it not happening? as Donika said, no, we had a clear recommendation from the European Commission since 2018. We had the European Parliament supporting it, which was also made very clear by your film. And I think your film also very showed that we are not talking about an abstract issue, but we are talking about, and I think that's very important, we are talking about the fate of basically of hundreds of thousands, of 10,000s of individuals whose lives are bogged up by this, I think, actually unacceptable situation. Well, so it's not the Commission, it's not the Parliament, it's the Member States. No? And we had, and we still have some who are skeptical about this. And I think essentially there are mainly 4 reasons, which actually have very little to do with Kosovo itself. Well, first we have kind of Member States who refer to the big number of Albanian asylum seekers. That's correct. But there are 2 important points to make here. The first one is that most of these Albanian asylum seekers are not Albanians from Kosovo, but they're Albanians from the Republic of Albania. So in 2021, we had, I think, 11,300 asylum applications from people from Albania and 2,300 from Kosovo in all of the EU. And the second point is that the problem essentially is not really kind of to be easily resolved by Albania or by Kosovo, but by the recipient country. When we look at data on the EU 27 level, it's very clear. Those people from Albania, Kosovo, actually from all over the Western Balkans who apply for asylum in the European Union, they come to a handful of countries, and mostly they come to France. Half of Albanian asylum applications handed down in the EU are handed down in France. Why is this? Because in France you have a system, an asylum system, which combines a relatively generous benefits for asylum seekers, meaning you get some money, you get, if you're lucky, accommodation, you get access to a top education, healthcare system, you get access to a good education system, and this is combined with very long procedures. So this just makes it very, very attractive. Many others have understood this. If you take, for example, Austria. Austria, like many others, have actually just shortened procedures for asylum seekers from the Western Balkans. They treat them just quickly, immediately, efficiently. And so in 2021, we had 35 asylum applications from Albania in Austria. France had 6,100. And Austria is actually a country that has more links to kind of Western Balkan countries than France. I think a second kind of group of countries, they see problems in what they call the Albanian mafia. That's in particular the Netherlands. But also here it's quite difficult to see, what actually should Kosovo do about a problem which essentially is a rule of law problem in the Netherlands and other member states. And I think there's a third group of officials from your member states who say, this is our chance, we just need to squeeze more. We need to push for even more rule of law reforms, because actually there's not much else we can squeeze with and push for. I think very clearly this did not work very well, because by doing this, by not delivering on the promises you made, you actually undermine your credibility and you undermine your influence, which I think has become quite obvious in Kosovo. And finally, you have domestic events. You have domestic issues, you have populations or constituencies which are, either against or careful or skeptical about anything which kind of smells like future enlargement, or anything which smells of bringing more people inside the country. And then you have elections here and you have elections there. And so I think these 4 factors together have actually meant that, you had member states which were skeptical, and explained why not much was moving, and it's all actually reasons where Kosovo cannot really change very much itself. I think it becomes even more absurd when we, against this background, when we think that Venezuelans are traveling without visas to Europe, and in June the Council basically issued a mandate to start negotiations with Qatar and Kuwait. It gives you an idea. So the question is still, why didn't it actually happen? No, I mean, why is the council so? Why Kosovo? And I think in this respect, it makes sense to look a little bit more on decision makers' procedures in the council. I mean, if something is slightly controversial or very controversial, essentially you have three groups of member states. No, you have someone or a few who are pushing for something. You have a group which don't really have a tremendously big interest, so they don't really care that much, and you have one or some member states who are opposing, and opposition essentially always has a price, because you are an EU member, and in the future you need other EU member states to support things what you want to do. So if you are basically constantly blocking, other member states, you will basically just create a lot of enemies, and this will basically pay back when once you want something to happen, and they all say no. I mean, you blocked, not happening. And I think with Kosovo visa liberalization, we had a particular dynamic, in the sense that the price for blockage was very low, because while you had a number of member states who actually had nothing against it and said it should happen, but there was no one who really wanted it. There was no member state who really pushed for this. So the price for this was very low. You didn't, by blocking, actually, you didn't make many enemies. You didn't annoy many member states. Actually, rather the opposite. You made some quite happy because they hadn't to be the ones actually blocking. Yes, and I think what we have been seeing now, maybe to come to what will happen now, things have been changing, as DONIKA has also lined out. I think that indeed, kind of linking, standing back from this idea that we are treated unfairly, it's unfair. It's unfair, basically, this move of Kosovo governments more recently to engage and basically try to work with the skeptics, I think has been especially fruitful with the Germans and the French, with all really joint meetings, inviting the ministries from France basically to visit to Kosovo. I think this has worked quite well. With the Netherlands, it was more difficult because they were not that interested. But so I think there is some move. We have kind of the European Council in June, where the issue was discussed, but no one was really outspokenly against. We have this new report on preparedness, which should be finished by the Commission by the end of the month. We have the visa working party meeting coming up on October 12th, where the issue should be discussed. And I think we have a shift in language of the skeptics. The Dutch Prime Minister Rutte, he in June said that later this year or next year we might take the next step, because they have done a lot in terms of rule of law and independent judiciary. The French ambassador in Kosovo in July has said that there is visible progress. You have you referred to it already, the statement of the Weimar Triangle, France, Germany, Poland, saying kind of we call for progress regarding the visa liberalization for Kosovo. Now this is new language, is moving in the right direction. I mean, you also see that the language is not very clear, no? I mean, it doesn't say we grant it now. But let's say, I think it's not a done deal, but we can, I think, be more optimistic than we could ever be until now, I think.
Thank you very much. I will go to Samir now. Samir, you come from Bosnia, and there is, apart from the fact that it's also a very important and a very interesting country, let's say, in the region, you have an additional issue with Kosovo, where you also have a visa regime. So I would like to ask you specifically about this issue. What does it mean for the region, inside the region, that you have this visa regime? And the second one, how you imagine maybe what would visa-free travel for Kosovo citizens to the Schengen area, what would it mean for the EU integration of the whole region? Because this is the general idea of the EU integration of the Western Balkans, that all of the countries do it together rather than one by one.
Of course, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I would like to congratulate QENDRESA for the excellent movie, not only because it's an excellent movie, because it's a topic that's going under the radar for years now. The people usually don't know it, and even in the region, when we speak about ordinary people, I mean in Bosnia, people don't even know that Bosnia and Kosovo have this very unfair visa regime. Before I start answering your questions within the time frame, I will just tell you a story. A couple of weeks ago, I had a study visit in the European Parliament. We talked with a Dutch MEP. And she was speaking about her campaign, political campaign, and how she campaigned. She said, I sat on a plane to do her political campaign for her seat in the European Parliament, and she said, I took a 10-hour-long flight to travel to my constituency. 10-hour-long flight from the Netherlands. And I asked her, where did you travel to your constituency? And she said, Dutch Antilles in the middle of Pacific. And she said, they are Dutch citizens, and they enjoy full rights as EU citizens traveling around. And then I asked her my question. Then I asked my question to her, how come? Because for me, it doesn't make sense that Netherlands, being one of the countries blocking the visa liberalization for Kosovars, is blocking a country which is citizens which live in a country that is even physically part of Europe, and at the same time she was traveling 10 hours by plane to meet her constituency and her voters, who are a normal Dutch citizens who can travel to the Netherlands and to the EU whenever they like. And those people who are disenfranchised the most through this visa regime between the EU and Kosovo, I would say it's actually the young people, pro-European, pro-democratic, young Kosovars. It is actually them who are being basically blocked to travel to the EU. And I think this should be first and foremost in the interest of the EU to bring those people. If the EU wants to build friends among the future generations of future politicians in Kosovo, it is those people, those young people that QENDRESA had in her movie, and hundreds of them who are today studying at best European universities, being scholarship holders of various foundations, and who are actually pro-European oriented. And for that matter, I would say it is not only that this is, relationship between Kosovo and the EU, it is also, Bosnian nationalistic politicians, when they see what's happening to Kosovo and when they saw what's happening to North Macedonia, to Albania, they will say, well, look, if this is how you're treating Kosovo, or this is how you're treating, North Macedonia, that changed the name and the constitution in order to, deliver, then why should we deliver, if the EU is not delivering? So in that sense, it's not that EU has lost its credibility only in Kosovo, it has lost its credibility also throughout the Western Balkan region as a whole, because the politician, currently now we have election campaign in Bosnia. No one is speaking about Bosnia-Kosovo visa regime, If you ask a ordinary person in Bosnia, they will not be able to tell you as much. It's also similar in Kosovo. I work for a Kosovar think tank, and it's very similar there. What they're focusing on is visa liberalization with the EU. With Bosnia, if it's important, it's usually for those young people working something with RAIKO, traveling. Even though, to those people who are traveling regionally, it is barely impossible for Kosovars to get a Bosnian visa. For Bosnians, I have a Kosovo visa in my passport, and it was just an administrative procedure. I got it within 15 days. However, Bosnia and Herzegovina, because of its own internal disputes, there is one part of Bosnia, and one group of leaders, political leaders, that constantly block anything that's being done with Kosovo. And not only, we're not speaking here about recognizing Kosovo as a country, as an independent country. We're speaking here only about recognizing travel documents of Kosovo, passports. And this is something that for an ordinary Kosovar, it's barely possible to get a visa in a document that's not recognized by a Bosnian state. And beyond that, I had numerous cases of friends of mine who have been harassed at the Bosnian border by police officers, border patrol, which are not let's say, friendly to Kosovo Albanians, you know? And this, in the end, creates an additional problem between the two countries, which is basically, I will not say artificial, but at the end of the day, we are still talking about people, about humans. Currently now, for example, again, RICO, Regional Youth Cooperation Office, is implementing a project called Super Schools. And super schools are basically, imagine Erasmus Plus for high schools. So it is basically having an exchange semester for young people which are 14, 15, 16, who would be traveling from one country to another to spend a semester at another school. So this is also a matter of reconciliation and of young people joining, hanging out together, meeting each other's culture. In a lot of cases, young people from the region meet usually, as I like to say it, on a neutral ground. They need to come to Austria. They need to go to Germany, you know, for some kind of a seminar. Why? Because it's easier at the current situation to meet somewhere where, you know, they will have it easier time to get a German visa than a Bosnian visa. And I remember it was 2 years ago, but this was very like a plain and plastic example, and I will finish with it. During the last 2 years ago Globsec summit, when I asked Miroslav Lajčák about this case, you know, we were sent there. We were 12 people. And we got invitations for 10 people. 2 of our Kosovar colleagues couldn't come. And then I even asked, what's the point of, you know, this regional cooperation mumbo jumbo if we are not, you know, preaching if we are not doing what we're preaching, you know? In this case, he said, you know, if you don't like the EU rules, then, you know, the countries of the region should go somewhere else, should look elsewhere. And there are countries that filling the gap, the void, that the EU with this kind of approach, you know, are making. So in this case, I would say it's about ordinary people, it's about future politicians and future leaders of Kosovo and of the Western Balkans, and it's about, you know, creating a prosperous future for young people in the region in order not to bring them somewhere else, but to have them, you know, meeting on the ground within their peers. And that's why I think it's super important to abolish not only the visa regime between the EU and Kosovo, but as soon as possible to create this intra-Western Balkan schemes, but first and foremost, you know, abolish the remaining regional visa liberalizations, I would say. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Maybe I will also ask a question to QENDRESA, because Samir already spoke a little bit about it, why it's actually important, especially for the young people, that visa liberalization is granted to Kosovo. So maybe you can also explain a little bit why you spoke especially about the students in your video, and maybe if you have some experiences also with Kosovo and Bosnia visa regime, that would be also interesting to hear.
Yeah, so first, the topic was so personal since I had to come to Vienna and I had to come here to study human rights. So this was the first thing that I had to deal with as a human rights expert in the future or a change maker in the future. It was visa liberalization, and was pretty hard for me. Unfortunately, I don't have a case with Bosnia, even though I tried to make the call to share it everywhere in order to reach more students that have different perspective. But unfortunately, I did not meet someone who had that case. But I think that the main purpose was to share the challenges, because as Samir said, it's always the students who are being affected by it. It's not a diplomat who already has, it's not someone who has, for example, a call for business corporation or something like that. It's the students, it's the youth of Kosovo.
Because I wanted to ask the next question to you, and also to all of the panelists. If you want to react to each other's statements, please go ahead.
I had a question for DONIKA, because when you mentioned the asylum seekers in France, recently I had a visit to one of the institutions in Bosnia, and they had like a French expert from French government assisting them, you know, with EU integration, etc., etc. And then I asked like this similar question about EU credibility and what's wrong with Kosovo visa liberalization. And then he said something that was really flawed, you know, and this is the argument that they usually give. They said, you know, there is this problem with, you know, Kosovar asylum seekers, and he said they are the #1 when it comes to applications in France, which made me laugh, especially with the numbers that you gave. So maybe do you have numbers of others like asylum seekers when it comes to France?
We didn't do that type of comparison. Among Western Balkan countries, Montenegro has the lowest score, but also they are like smallest nation in the country in the Western Balkans. But you know, like with France, the problem is that what KRISTOF already shared, it's the Albanian asylum seekers that they have put in the same box, which is ridiculous. He's probably bringing more stats. Yes, but it's not, and it has been reduced significantly. But they also mentioned the Georgia case because they always mention the previous experience, and if the last decision on visas brought them asylum seekers from Georgia but also Albania, then the next one might be as well having the same effect. Like I also had cases with on visas. First, before I go to the case of Bosnia on visa liberalization, is that with the EU it was a leverage that they wanted to keep with Kosovo. They held strong, like they kept it there because it was the only carrot that they can give to Kosovo citizens and to Kosovo, because we signed the SAA against all odds, with the EU juggling with non-recognizers. So for Kosovo, it's very unlikely that with something like EU membership or accession negotiations or application for, well, not accession negotiation because that's very distant, but also the application for EU membership will happen. So let's keep the only leverage that we have and use it as much as we can. And it's not just on rule of law, but it's also on the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia. It was Sebastian Kurz, the former prime minister of Austria, who actually, tried to even put and this is a tendency among member states to link the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia with visa liberalization process, and I constantly say no to this. Under any circumstances, these are two different processes, and Kosovo statehood, or it cannot be related to anything with visa liberalization because Taiwan has it, and Venezuela as well. So, like, you don't have any more arguments to say no. Also, we don't need visa liberalization as a leverage for rule of law reforms in Kosovo because we are starting a vetting process already, and it's happening regardless of the visas or or any other thing. It was the government agenda because the president, the prime minister, basically ran on the reforming and the rule of law ticket. So there is no more point of using it as leverage, and it won't work. So that's why it's about the time to actually make a step. For me, my biggest concern is, what KRISTOF said. You had France and Netherlands being explicitly against because they wouldn't bother. I mean, it's France and it's Netherlands, so they can do whatever they want. But then you have hidden member states that were actually feeling more, reluctant to go explicit against the visa liberalization process and were comfortably hiding behind France, Netherlands, and also Denmark to some extent. We never talk about it, but Denmark is quite reluctant. So what if, if now we push it for voting, what will happen? It's QMV. Yes, but do we have the votes? Do we have the support? And that's why, I find this statement relevant, because Germany and France saying yes and Netherlands slightly changing and softening its approach might as well send a signal to EU member states that it's about the time and we will go for voting, and, this process should go forward. The other issue that is to be discussed is, we are discussing visa liberalization with Kosovo, and just recently Borrell has been the one who in a way heralded the new agreement or whatever, because it's not even an agreement between Kosovo and Serbia, and on freedom of movement. And we have Spain that actually, does not recognize Kosovo documents. So it's about the time to actually move towards Spain. And of course, Bosnia and Herzegovina, which hasn't been on the agenda, unfortunately, because we just don't deal with non-recognizers. And it's very problematic because this wasn't even an issue of priority for the EU as well. We have the same issue with Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, for instance, and the EU has the leverage to facilitate this because they are, especially Moldova and Ukraine, are getting the candidate status might, just make the EU sort of relevant actor to a point of, softening their approach towards Kosovo documents, because Kosovo lifted the visa regime towards Ukraine and volunteered to host Ukrainians after the Russian invasion. Now, what we have to do is just understand that we cannot celebrate yet, that we have to engage bilaterally through our diplomatic missions, but also call on Germany and France to actually help us at least, make sure that the process of voting will go smoothly and in favor of Kosovo. Whether it's going to happen this year, I mean, it is very likely that we might have the voting because they don't want to wait for the Spanish presidency. It's going to be very problematic to actually leave it there. We really hope for the French and the German presidencies, and it was really lost momentum. But the next might be Swedes, and maybe this is when the actual, freedom of movement will start. For me, as a person who has traveled a lot, the most challenging route was flying from Sarajevo to Belgrade, because I was flying from and to a country which did not recognize my documents. So it was extremely challenging. I really needed a huge guarantee from the EU, because it was an EU project, to actually get the visa and travel to Sarajevo, which unfortunately I had to go through Frankfurt, Ljubljana, and then to Sarajevo. And because visas are not the only issue. I mean, if the Dutch representative traveled 10 hours to go to, I don't know, like in the middle of nowhere, I traveled 10 hours to go from Prishtina to Sarajevo, which could have been easy to walk. So it was extremely stressful, because I wasn't sure whether I would be allowed to fly, because there are some land borders which you cannot cross and you shouldn't cross. But then how would I be received in Belgrade? So this still remains one of the most challenging, flights that I've taken, and I would probably not repeat it again, but I was very young and very willing to test freedom of movement. It won't happen again until the situation changes.
Until there is no visas for you.
Definitely.
Okay. I have 2 points in my mind. Someone mentioned also that there was this no state inside the European Union who would actually really lobby for, I think it was you, right? Now we have Czech presidency in the European Union, and and they actually proclaimed it as their goal, that they would like to try to push for visa liberalization. How do you see they're succeeding or not on that? And maybe if you found the statistics on the previous issue, that would be great if you share as well.
When I was in Prague, they said, we will only deal with Western Balkans if we have a breakthrough. So they were like, only if something positive is going to happen, being, of course, pushed by France and Germany, they would do something. Otherwise, they wouldn't, because they considered it redundant to repeat the same things and have statements that are, just like purely copy and pasted from previous years. And maybe if France and Germany push, then they would do it. Otherwise, I don't think that the initiative would come solely from the Czech Republic.
Well, here is the statement of the Weimar Triangle.
And that's why there is a hope that something might happen.
Yeah, I think it's always difficult for a presidency to push something which is controversial. So usually they don't do that. But I think the Czechs are well intentioned, and I think they would be happy to get this done. It would also be a success, and I think they are convinced that it's the right thing. And maybe we can go a bit further. I think they will. except if it's very clear that, you know, they see that it's not going to work, I think then they would drop it, yeah. But others, I think they're positively inclined.
So a lot of quiet diplomacy in between the meetings.
That's one thing what I wanted to add to say, to try to say something constructive as well. I think what has worked pretty well is Kosovo institutions engaging sort of the skeptics, yeah? But I think it would also be worth to actually try to engage even more with the friends, because it is just much more difficult for the skeptics to actually continue to oppose when you are confronted, you know, in a coherent way with the arguments, and the arguments are there. No, it's not a difficult case to make, and I think so. If Kosovo would have or could convince, you know, 1, 2, 3 of those who are anyway somewhat positively inclined to take a clearer stance on this, you know, that I think would actually help and would make it more difficult for those who resist to stick to their line, because it would make it more expensive, basically. You know? It would make it more costly. We've seen this also in the first round of visa liberalization for the Western Balkans. No, I mean the French and the Dutch were not happy about Albania, yeah? Bosnia, but particularly Albania. And I think that it was a different time, but what really helped back then was that a certain NGO I know quite well published the assessments of the Commission of the individual countries, because the Commission and the member states actually at the time, they wanted to keep it secret, because that would basically allow this political wheeler-dealing and say, oh no, I think they're not really prepared enough. But once it was in black and white that the Commission experts, in addition to member state experts, actually said, you know, Bosnia and Albania, they meet the conditions, then it became really difficult for the French and the Dutch, and they gave up actually, because it would have just exposed them as very, very unconstructive, I think. And maybe on the numbers, I have these numbers, but unfortunately they are somewhere in Excel, and I thought I would not go back to this. But I think what is relatively clear is we have relatively high numbers of asylum seekers from the visa-free 8, so essentially from the Western Balkan 5 plus Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. Yeah? We are talking, when in 2015 it was 156,000. It declined then later on. It stands at 52,000 last year, out of which 11,000 Albania, 2,300 Kosovo. So it's clear Kosovo is not really a big issue in this scheme. But what is also interesting is that those who come, they increasingly focus on the countries which have generous systems and long procedures. In 2015, 5% of asylum applicants from these 8 countries applied in France. This has now risen to a third. Every third, you know, from these 8 countries who applies for asylum in the EU comes to France.
And what is the reason for that?
The reason is because it's beneficial. Because in Austria, basically, if you are from Albania or from Bosnia or from Serbia, it doesn't matter. Basically, you are just you enter the process immediately, and in 5 days, basically, it's done. So there is no incentive because you don't have any benefit. Yeah? Your kids will never see school because basically you are already, and there is cooperation with, I mean, that's essentially the visa-free 8 belong to the few countries where actually EU member states manage to send people who don't get asylum back. You know, with other countries this usually doesn't work. So there is a relatively efficient system. But the French, they don't use, they also are very bad at returning, even to countries who are actually willing to take them. I think that explains it, pure and simply.
I've got more questions and probably you've got more comments, but let me turn also to the audience and ask them if they want to also comment or ask something. And I see 2 hands. Luca, 3 hands. Okay, so let's start from Stephanie and then Adi and then Elena.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for speaking today about Kosovo's visa liberalization. I mean, we talked before, it's a very important topic, and I think that so many people in the European Union are not aware about how difficult it is, and we did experience it in our work as well. One thing is, I was quite surprised, I mean, for the first hour until you actually did mention it, that we talk about Kosovo, and Serbia was not really mentioned that often. This is very rare, I would say. And we talk about visa liberalization, but I mean, there was this recent agreement between Serbia and Kosovo on this plate, the car plate situation. So my question would be, what do you think, would you assess at least like this when it comes to freedom of movement? How does it practically, I don't know, tackle people living in Kosovo or in Serbia or the Serbs in northern Kosovo, this agreement? Like, is it really helping also for Kosovo, I mean, to travel a little bit freer? I mean, just, yeah, that would be my question about the recent agreement.
Maybe let's collect a couple of questions. So Adi also raised his hand.
Yes, good evening. Thank you very much for all your presentations. My question would be actually, what is the situation in the region? I think at the latest Brdo Briuni meeting, all 5 other Western Balkan countries came out in favor of visa liberalization for Kosovo. And what are the opportunities, or are there any opportunities for other Western Balkans countries to jump in and to basically advocate for the visa-free travel for Kosovo? And has that been happening, and to what extent?
Thank you. And at the back.
Hello, and thank you so much for this interesting presentation. And the video from QENDRESA. So my country, Georgia, was mentioned many times during the presentation and the speeches. So I would like to comment on several issues. The first of all, there was mentioned that the reason why the Kosovo doesn't get the visa liberalization is the problem of the mafia. And there is a question. We do really think that the members of the mafia can really waiting the visa liberalization to travel one country to the another, and especially in European Union? I don't think so. And also my country, that Georgia, has the same kind of situation, maybe not the same, but similar a bit, the mafia situation. And the whole Spain is extremely mad and disappointed, but still we got a visa liberalization in 2017. And the second part is that events which is happening now in Serbia and in Georgia, especially the minority rights, all LGBTQ plus rights, even the prides is not possible to established, or people can go outside. But after I met QENDRESA and traveled to Kosovo, which was extremely amazing experience for me, because with my passport is not possible, just the Austrian residence permit, I saw that situation is a bit different there. So even better than Serbia or Georgia. So when we're talking about today's events, we really have to compare what is nowadays. So, and then we have to compare the countries which we gave the visa liberalization. And yes, we have these things all the time that people are giving us the notes that we don't have to, our governments has to deal differently, but there's nothing more there. So, and the last part, and I will finish. So that about the state supports, I agree with the speaker, especially for the Georgian situation. It was Baltic countries and Poland because of the same history. But what about Austria? I think that a lot of Kosovo people are living here, and they came before because of the war. And Austrian banks' investments depends on the workers of the Balkan people, especially people from Kosovo, and they're not lobbied for them to get a visa liberalization, which is the huge issue for me and for everyone who really supports Kosovo to get the visa liberalization. So there's a lot of arguments or counter-arguments of why the Kosovo doesn't have the visa liberalization, but we really have to see the reality, what is here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think Adi also wanted to make a short comment.
Yes, I wanted to say something which extremely, not bothering, but I think it's important to clarify. There's a lot of talk about experiences of holders of Kosovo passport when it comes to going for studies or going for work, which is de facto residence permits, which is not covered by the visa-free travel that we are talking about today. So I think it's, in that sense, it's important to clarify that yes, in technical terms, it would help Kosovo in a sense that the embassies and consulates would have time to deal with the residence permit, but it will in the end leave us all 6 countries of the region in the same situation where de facto freedom of movement of the citizens of the 6 countries is not there until either we're members of the EU or in some other terms. And I think that is the next discussion that we as a region will have to take. We will have to have.
Thank you. Very quickly, one more comment from here and we'll turn to the panel.
It's more... Okay. Good evening to everyone. My name is Anton Marku. I do come from Kosovo and I have studied also here at Vienna University Political Sciences. I have some questions. The first question for DONIKA and SAMIR. We have in the region EU integration process, we have Berlin process, which in my opinion is more like the video we have seen, some voices to be heard but no faces to be seen. And we have Open Balkan, a new initiative in our region. What is your opinion concerning this initiative? Is that a parallel process or it's something that will help Bosnia and Kosovo, for instance, to lift visa liberalization to each other? And for KRISTOF, what about non-recognizers? There are 5 non-recognizers, and I have got the impression that the blockers of Kosovo visa liberalization are France, the Netherlands, and Denmark. Do you think that also these 5 non-recognizers can, at the stage when it comes to voting, become a problem for Kosovo? And the last question also for KRISTOF. Where do you place Austria in all this game? You said that sometimes when it comes to voting there are 3 groups of countries. What do you think Austria, what is the role of Austria in visa liberalization for Kosovo? Thank you. And I will really have to leave in some 10 minutes.
So maybe
I'm taking part in Vienna night run, and we will start soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So maybe before our guest leaves, we will answer his questions and then we return to all the others. And with regards to the other questions, I would really like to ask you to focus on just one from what has been asked. I suggest that Samir will take the situation. Okay, let's just... Okay, Donika, just the floor is yours.
No, I'll start. I mean, of course, everything in the Western Balkans overlaps. I mean, if you look at the Berlin process itself, it has elements that, you know, have been discussed before, agreements that have been reached before, you know, on freedom of movement, regional economic area, and so on. And then the issue with with Open Balkans is different. It's different because it's very tricky to be against it because I worked on regional cooperation quite a lot. And for me, the biggest problem was that regional cooperation in the Balkans wasn't deriving organically from the region, but it was being imposed from the EU. So basically it was an EU-driven project and project-based. And then when it came from the Balkans, we started opposing it. And when we started opposing it, we had the right reasons to do so, because we had, first it was, you know, it included only 3 countries. The first meeting took place in Serbia, and back then we had President Tadic, who wasn't even able to travel to Serbia to attend the meeting because he had an arrest warrant issued by Serbia, and that would have been problematic even to physically attend. And then the second one, we did not know what it was. We still, I mean, it's called Open Balkans, but we know very little about it, and I'm sure that even the countries that actually started this initiative don't know much about it. It was just ad hoc. It started sort of opposing the EU reluctance to enlarge to whatever what was happening in the Berlin process. It was, let's just start do something that is from the Balkans but really not defined. The third one is it's coming from Vučić. I mean, he is clearly an autocrat. We weren't sure where Kosovo stands in the West, in the Open Balkans as an initiative. Is it like a separate party that is recognized independent as an independent one? We have had Vučić started this initiative, a person, a leader who has an active agreement between Kosovo and Serbia signed in 2012 on recognition on diplomas and hasn't done it, and why now Open Balkans will do that for Kosovars, or the freedom of movement and so on. There are hundreds of certificates which are not recognized in Serbia. We cannot travel, I mean, we can travel to Serbia, but gaining residence permit or like long stays in Serbia are almost impossible. So all these things haven't been cleared, and we don't know what it is. That's why we were reluctant to become part of it. We still don't know what's the future of it. I mean, there is a lot of discussion about it merging with the Berlin process and then, you know, going back to where we were before. We still don't know about it, but honestly, I would feel very reluctant, you know, given by simply the fact that who initiated it and how it worked so far. I mean, we've seen also Montenegro joining. Bosnia and Kosovo are, you know, Kosovo is against, and Bosnia is, of course, for their own reasons also after the process. So honestly, like, I wouldn't really talk about it. I would just focus on whatever that is there on regional cooperation and try to work on the initiatives that are there and which we haven't been really implementing or respecting so far.
Thank you.
Go back to the other
Sure.
Okay, non-recognizers. You never know. At the current state, what we hear actually should not be that much of a problem. Yeah? Definitely not with Greece. I mean, Spain is always a bit, I don't know. I think it has been difficult to predict these dynamics in the past. You know, Donika said basically you're celebrating twice and basically too earlier. So I think it's a very good question. It looks that it should be okay from those 5, but you know, there can always be surprises, I would say. Austria, well, definitely in the group who supports, but not a country who is really actively very much pushing and, you know, taking this really on the agenda and, you know, calling up others in EU capitals and basically really giving this, unfortunately, but I don't really see them doing this to a large extent. Could I also say one thing or try on the Open Balkans? I don't understand how this could work. I mean, essentially, and I agree with Donika that maybe even the inventors are not really completely clear of what they mean. But essentially, if this is supposed to be sort of like a regional common market, this would be a tremendously ambitious project. It's essentially, you know, like joining the EU single market, which is also a tremendously ambitious project. But this, you basically join then a rich single market. You have neighbors who are rich, who are powerful, who are economically well advanced. You benefit, no? So to do all these hugely ambitious things, to then be together, you know, with your Balkan neighbors, I think there is just much too little motivation to do all this. And besides then, once you are then there together, it's actually difficult to join another single market, no? So you would then basically be, you know, why should Montenegro participate in something like this if it then prohibits, you can't then say, okay, I'm part of this local single market and I join the EU single market, which as an EU member, you would of course have to do. So I really think that this is, it's like Berlin process and the other many of the regional initiatives, and I have nothing against regional initiatives, all fine, support, but as a, you know, it's a sideshow in order compensating for that the real thing, which is EU accession, is not happening. Some of them are invented by member states who want to show that somehow something is happening, and now someone in the region is basically also saying we want to show that something is happening. But just because it originates in the region, I think is not reason enough to support it.
I think there was an interesting question that you can address about whether Western Balkans as a region can support Kosovo visa liberalization.
Well, I mean, I will answer this as well. And this also partly answers your question when it comes to, if not Open Balkans, and I will not repeat myself, and I will not repeat what colleagues already mentioned, but then there is a very viable alternative process that is currently going underway, which is a bit going under the radar. And this is a process that it's facilitated by the RCC, Regional Cooperation Council, that aims at having all the citizens of the Western Balkans 6 to travel within the region only with their IDs. And then in the discussions with some of the officials in the RCC, they said the biggest benefit to this agreement would be exactly that Bosnia and Kosovo citizens would be able to travel without passports, meaning, okay, passports are still not like as travel documents valid, you know, not recognized by Bosnia, but IDs would be okay. Because the rest of the region, there are already bilateral agreements where citizens of those countries already can travel with their IDs. However, this would, in a way, bypass Milorad Dodik, to say it, to name the elephant in the room. Bypass Milorad Dodik, who would then not be able to say, okay, I will continue blocking, freedom of movement within the region because we don't want to recognize Kosovo, you know, etc., etc., etc. And at the end of the day, Milorad Dodik will follow what Vučić will do. So if Vučić would sign, and in the end what happened, so there were several attempts to sign to this regional agreement, and they failed. Because at least to latest information that I know, it was there was a problem of wording between Serbia and Kosovo, with asterisks, without. They couldn't agree. Again, it was not Bosnia. Bosnia will basically here follow what Serbia is doing, even though Bosnia has the worst, I would say, relationship with Kosovo, much worse than Serbia. Much worse than Greece, that also doesn't, you know, recognize, but Greek citizens don't need a visa to travel to Kosovo. So basically, here we have like this very rigid visa regime that it's preventing, you know, people to travel. And I don't think that open Balkans should serve as an alternative for something like this, because also we get mixed signals from the EU when it comes to open Balkans. In Germany, they say, you know, this is a parallel framework to Berlin process, but then from the Americans, we say, yeah, that's good. So even the foreigners are not aligned when it comes to there. And then in Bosnia, you know, we have 3 sides which are rarely aligned. And then if the foreigners are not aligned, that then additionally, I would say, wouldn't help. So I think this would be something to help, you know, establish a regional framework for visa-free travel within the region. And I want to congratulate you and wish you best of luck at the night run.
Let's go to Donika and ask her to comment on the license plates and how it affects.
Before I go there, Adi is right. You know, it's a short stay. I'm writing a paper. Yeah, I'm writing a paper on this issue, and my French colleague constantly put an asterisk and said like 90-day stay, 90-day stay, and I was like, isn't this what visa liberalization is? He said like, public in France doesn't know. They might think we are lobbying for EU integration or for something that is more than just, you know, like short stay in the EU. So yes, definitely we should address this, and I think talking with the EU member states, but also with citizens in Kosovo, is very important on this matter. On Kosovo and Serbia, honestly, I don't know how to. I mean, it's not an agreement; it's a tweet. We haven't seen anything. I mean, it really is another level of lacking transparency in the process. I'm very worried about how this is going to then continue, because now we are just having Borrell's tweet, and usually in the past, at least, we used to have ambiguous agreements, but they were published, and we saw what parties agreed on. This time we don't see, and we know that we abolished the white papers, but honestly, it's not like freedom of movement. We had it from 2011, and I mean, I could travel to Serbia now. It saves my time, because I mean, I'm not being issued this white paper, which they called potvrda, but honestly, like, it doesn't really even, it's not even incremental approach, it's decremental, because we are going, in 2022, we are going back to 2011 and renegotiating elements and calling them a success. So for me, I mean, where's the breakthrough? It was worrying that both parties had said that this is like a big success, because it also does not change anything on Serbs in the north, because it doesn't include the IDs and documents issued by the parallel institutions of Serbia and Kosovo. So it was, people were not allowed to enter the country, and then they were allowed. So it's still ambiguous, and we don't know how, and we cannot even monitor its implementation because we don't have the text. And now we are going to deal with another deadline, because what we agreed, what they agreed, in Brussels, it's only on IDs and it's not on registration plates. And the 31st of October is yet another deadline which the government of Kosovo has set for Serbia. And we are still, again, are going to have another deadline, tension, and then solution. But again, the card registration plates have been negotiated in 2015. So the Freedom of Movement Agreement has been negotiated in 2011, 2015, 2016, 2022. And we will probably have other agreements, elements that will add on that, the framework that already existed in 2011. So I'm worried about, the process not having like really a push towards the final deal, but going back to and recycling deals from the past, lack of transparency, and the fact that, there is clear lack of also this bottom-up approach that both, like at least, the government of Kosovo has been proclaiming before getting to power. So it is all worrying. When I saw the tweet, it was okay, the EU works on deadlines. And this also is worrying because it's also, just because we were fearing another war in Europe, we came up with a Twitter solution. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. So I don't know. I don't know what to make out of it. Let's wait for the other deadline and see what's going to happen. But seriously, it's not going to push the countries towards the final deal.
I would like then to ask KRISTOF to comment, and maybe very shortly, SAMIR, CiviKos, if you have some final remarks. Yeah.
Just very quickly on Adi's point, Adi's question, which I think is a. Is it okay? Yeah. I think that's a great idea, actually. I don't know, have a joint op-ed by all or most of the other West Balkan leaders somewhere in, I don't know, Politico or the FT, would, I think, make an impression. And I mean, Vučić said he supports, actually. I don't know, but it's a...
just to undermine the EU's credibility. It's flags constantly saying that, look, like on the...
You don't even this... Yeah, that's true.
It's not genuine. But it's at least out there.
Yeah, and even if Vučić is not, I mean, if you have, I don't know, Zaev, Rama, and Abazovic or so, I think it would be, I don't know, before the Thessaloniki summit, actually, through Trajkovski, we managed to get, it was also not everyone, but 4, I think, also, to write a joint op-ed, which at the time was also good because, there was this image that they're all basically just quarreling and having wars, and so, they come up something together, pro-EU-oriented, pro-development. I don't know, if someone has the time and the courage to take this up, I would think that that's actually a good idea.
Okay, thank you very much. SAMIR?
Maybe you can just...
I just wanted to say something quick. Like, we know that visas are for 90 days, of course, but if I start with my own experience, if I had this 19 days, I would have not go to Skopje 3 times in order to fulfill my application for Austrian residency. So it's about giving that opportunity so you can go in Austria or you can go in Germany and you have the opportunity to see the university, to apply for a university. And it's also about non-formal trainings. Like, if you want to go to a training, you have 3 months before to apply for a visa or to make your documents in order to go just for a 3-day training. I'm talking mostly about this, and also in the video it was presented that in some cases you had the year-whole process without even reaching the country that you're going, and it's rejected. Now, this is unfair in my idea, yeah.
I would say it's unfair, and it's super expensive, especially, if it's like 3-5 days. I have a girlfriend. I have then a private example to share with you because she's not here. She will come soon to Vienna to study here as well. She's currently studying in Belgium. A girlfriend of mine, she's from Kosovo as well. In her case, it was even worse. So in order to apply for a Belgian, visa to study in Belgium, she had to apply in Bulgaria. She couldn't apply in Kosovo because in Kosovo they weren't issuing visas because of COVID. But in order to go to Bulgaria, she had to apply for a Bulgarian visa, which luckily, Bulgarian embassy made an exception to take her application. So in order to apply for a visa, for a Belgian visa, she had to apply for a visa. And this is some kind of like a Kafkaesque process, in order to reach it, and she was like 2 months late for the start of her studies, I studied also in Vienna, but I also didn't need to apply at all for a visa, student visa, but Bosnia has a bilateral agreement with Austria, so I just had to come here and directly applied for residence permit. What was positive, and I will finish with this, from the EU level, or partly EU level, was a most recent Congress of the European People's Party, EPP, which was held in Rotterdam, I think 2 or 3 months ago, and they adopted there how it's called, a emergency resolution, urging the EU, the Council, to adopt visa liberalization for Kosovo citizens, and this is good in a way because in a lot of EU countries, including the Western Balkans, so EPP is not only EU umbrella party. EPP parties are also in the rule in the vast majority of the Western Balkans. It kind of sends a signal. That even those, and this may be then response also to gentleman's question, what to do in the region. EPP members in the region will also now need to abide or to respect the resolution that they voted for in Rotterdam. So at least it gives a positive signal, a positive vibe, especially to the EU member states and EPP parties, members in the EU, that this should be pushed forward. And it's also a clear signal to us in the region, where should it go, like where would it makes sense to go and, to relieve a bit, people, especially young people who need to, go through this very long process emotionally, physically, mentally, financially, in order to enjoy something that's a fundamental human right, the freedom of movement.
Thank you very much, Samir, and thank you all for your remarks. We have, I think, opened more issues than we've closed or solved, but let's at least hope for the best, as we always do, and let's watch what will happen in October. And before I close here, I would like also to invite you for another discussion that we will have tomorrow, and it deals also with another Western Balkan country, namely Bosnia and Herzegovina, that will have elections very soon, and Samir will also give his remarks there. So please come here again tomorrow, and for the rest who will not be able to make it tomorrow, then have a great evening, and thank you again for joining us. We will still have some drinks and snacks outside, so please stay a bit longer and chat and continue discussing. Thank you again.